I have got raw sienna, permanent rose, and I'm putting about half a teaspoon of water into each of these, cobalt blue, turquoise. I've got round number 10. I'm just going to start with the yellow because the yellow is your lightest colour. So you're always best to start mixing that one first so it's not tainted in any way. And I want these to be consistent. So these are all transparents. The turquoise that I'm using is a Cotman student quality turquoise. Now that is not consistent. I need them to be in consistent dilution. So I'm going to pop a bit more water in. Try again, that's better. Otherwise one colour will fight against another colour and I don't want that to happen. And I also don't want my dog to be too stripy. This turquoise. So it's student quality one and it's transparent. So that's why I've used a student quality turquoise. So I want them all to be transparent today so I get a really nice glow. Okay, so I'm going to come on with some water and do some underpainting first of all. So I've drawn out the dog, very cute, it's a Labradoodle. And I'm wetting all over except I'm going to avoid the eyes. Just get this really nice glow on the whites. Hopefully some of you tune in. Hopefully you don't tune into the ones before because I haven't deleted them yet. Okay, so I've got plenty of water on here. Just check my brush is clean because I'm going to go into the yellow first of all. So this is the raw sienna. Then I'm going to be looking at the photo and I'm looking for the bits that are glowing basically. So some have got a warmth and a yellow to them. I'm just going to streak some of this in. So the top of the head is really quite light, so I'm going to keep that nice and light. At this point it doesn't matter really where you're going as long as you are avoiding the eyes, and I'm going to take some of this into the background as well. I'm going to have a really nice loose background. And then with the other colours, what I'm considering, I'll go on to the rose, is if there's any warmth anywhere. So we've got a little bit of warmth. We don't want it to be too stripy. So you look for shadow and put colour in where shadow is. Warmth and cool tones. I sometimes think it's hard for you to see these, but they are there. Again, I'm going to pop a little bit of that rose through in the picture as well. Turquoise. So with this I'm thinking cool tones. So I know that at this point I'm looking at a psychedelic dog, but honestly it works. You've got to see the whole process to see this working. So I'm just blending some of this through. So the blues are for the cooler tones. You'll have warm bits, you'll have cool bits. Bring a little bit around the eye here. And take some streaks of the turquoise through as well. It's nice because it mixes with the other colours. I am going to have to use the hairdryer today, but I'm totally live. You've seen the process as I'm doing it. There's no editing. Hopefully no more disasters. You can have disasters in painting, but disasters with technology is hard. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of psychedelic happening now, which is what I like. This is not wrong. I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue in, but not a lot. So this is a different tone of blue. So a little bit in down here. So really where all the real darks are. I'm just going to pop a little bit for those shadowed areas, which isn't too much really. Just show you've got that difference in tone. Okay, so I'm going to dry that one off. You want to go nice and gently because it'll be quite wet. These little bits run like that, I quite like that. It's all adding to the fur texture. Now I've got quite a big puddle here, so to stop that I'm going to take a damp brush and just lift a little bit out, just because I don't want to explode that everywhere. I'm drying on a low setting to start with so I don't blast it everywhere. Higher setting. Blowing everything away. So feel free to pop a comment on, say hello, and do a like, ask me a question. I will try and look at the questions at the end. If I can't answer them and I can't work the technology, I'll put the answers in comments or on the community page for you. I'm trying my best, I'm learning. It's a steep learning curve. I keep saying I'm old, but I don't think that's an excuse. I keep getting told I'm not that old yet. Okay, so I'm going to look at working into some of the features of the dog first. I have got some, I'm going to use turquoise on the eyes. I've got turquoise and I've got Hematite Genuine, which is a Daniel Smith colour. If you haven't got that, you can use sepia, you could use burnt umber, you could use a mixture of burnt umber and ultramarine to get a really nice dark. I might still supplement with extra darks yet. So I'm going to come on to one of these eyes to start with. So I'm using a round number 6, coming on to dry. It's not very often I pick up a little brush, but what I'm trying to do here is to preserve the white of the fur that's coming over the eye. So this is a number 2. Now I could have masked this out, but I'm not a huge fan of masking fluid, so I'm going to try not to use it. It has its place, and I do have to use it occasionally, but if I can manage without it, I much prefer that. It's not very often I pick up a number 2, and it's usually when I'm doing detail like eyes. So I've got this Hematite Genuine, which is just a very, very dark sepia sort of colour. I quite like it because it's got some oomph about it. I'm going to come in whilst the eye's still wet. This bit's very, very dark, and you've got the highlight, and I want it to flow, and this is what it's doing. It's flowing really nicely, not too far. I've used neat paint, and I will come in after and sharpen it up. I'm going to come round the top edge of the eye as well, so that it's flowing in from that direction. This is all about getting that really nice fluid look on the eye. So you can see that moving really nicely. Well, hopefully you can. I think you can expand your screen. If I feel like I've gone further and further away because I couldn't see it. But hopefully you can expand on your screen so you can see this. And then I can also run a little bit along this bottom edge of the eye here. If I dip into my water, I'm going to soften, just touching the paint, wetting further than it needs to go, that bottom edge. That's going to soften in nicely and blend through. And I'm going to do the same with the other eye. So I'm going to come in with the turquoise. I'm avoiding those little white dashes because I want to keep those as highlights. If you lose them, it's not the end of the world. You can just pop in a little bit of white pen. Or a bit of white acrylic ink works well. Then I'm going to come in again with my number 2. Just try and preserve a little bit of fur coming across the eye. And back into the dark colour. I'm going to pop a little bit in here. Now in the photograph, I'll pop the photograph on the community page if you want to have a go. There isn't that much dark in the eye, but the problem with that, when it reflects on a photograph, is you often, if you leave it out, it looks like you've missed it, and you don't want it to look like you've missed it, so you're going to pop a little bit in. It's like when you do a wonky building and the building was wonky, and then people say to you, but the building's wonky, and you go, yeah, I know, it was. It's that same thing. Down the bottom edge of the eye, coming around the outer edge. And getting that nice softness. A little highlight here as well. Once you've got the eyes in, it really sort of brings the dog to life. Any animal, in fact, it brings them to life. Pop a little bit in there. So you just want that nice soft effect to start with, that real softness. And then as that dries, we can work into those. And then I'm just going to again soften in this bottom edge. So just a touch of water touching the paint just to soften that in a little bit. It just starts to blend it a little bit. In fact, I'm going to do a little bit there, a little bit there as well. Okay, so I'll pop my number 2 down because I don't use that very often, and I'm going to come into the nose. Now, noses are really interesting, and how I approach noses is to pop the dark in first, let that dry and glaze over, glaze over, glaze over. So as soon as I do this, the cute doggy will start to look like a pig. But the process means that those glazes later will work really nicely. So I've just picked up my number 2 again because I just need to do this little line here. And then I've got a little line coming down here. What I'm doing is picking out the areas of dark. Those areas of dark give the definition. And it will all just start to work as you layer on. Try and get that as neat as possible. A little bit there. Rinse those 2 off. Okay, so I need basically a shadow colour that works now. I am going to use a little bit of cobalt blue and add a little bit of burnt sienna into that mix. I've kept this quite pale. And what I'm going to start to do is to come in and create some of the areas of fur and shadow. So the first one being just under the nose. It's going to start to define the mouth. What I will do at the same time, I hold a lot of brushes, is pick some up on a rigger, a long thin brush, so I can start to get these really nice wispy effects. Now, I always think less is more when you're doing something like this. It's a white dog, we don't want to put too much detail in. I tend to focus on the areas that are around the focal point and not too much on the rest of the body. So just with the rigger, just starting to build up some direction to the fur basically. With my round number 10, just in places I will touch with water. Not a huge amount of water, but I just want some of it to soften in. Got a really nice dark area here. vary the pressure of your brush. Where it's really light on the photograph, I don't want you to take too much on. Just keep thinking less is more. So I'm using my number 6 at the minute. And start to define the side of the head there. I'm quite practiced at doing this, so I can do a few areas and then just dab in with the water, but you can do one stroke, dab in with the water. Don't feel that you've got to do a load and then it dries too much. You want some of that to be softened in. A combination of hard and soft edges works much better. I'm just mixing up some more of that grey, checking that it's not too dark. Where I've got my edges here, so we're going to have a little bit on the body because we need to define the body from the head. So I can pop a little bit on here. I just keep changing the direction of my brush, varying the pressure. I've got the line here. Wet brush. Just going to soften that in quite a lot. Just dabbing randomly through this. I basically want to define that edge and that edge so that I've picked out the ear and I've picked out the leg and the back of the body here. And do a little bit around the eyes, some shadow. And just touch to soften in some of those bits. Just makes it so much more expressive if you can keep it loose. If you struggle to understand where the tone is, if you squint, it's often easy to see, or easier to see. Squint at the picture and you'll see the darker areas, and they're the bits you're just trying to pick up. Really nice fluid motion. We want some around the nose area. It's looking cute already. Just going to wet my number 6 just to dab in some water here because it's a bit sort of a smaller area. If I pick up a tiny bit of the very, very dark that we've used in the eyes, I'm just going to come in a couple of places. So this is just to accentuate that dark. It's not this dark in the photograph, but this is the difference between artistic license and my interpretation really. So I'm just picking out areas that I know it will benefit from a little bit of dark. So a little bit under the ears. It's still damp, so it's running in, but if it wasn't damp then you just soften that in with a brush again. in that same process. Any little bits around the eyes, again, will just bring you the focus to the eyes. So I haven't got much on the brush. I'm picking it up on the number 6. My number 6 is quite dry. It's just giving an extra bit of oomph. You'll hear me talk about oomph a lot. I'm just going to soften that little bit in under there. I don't want it to be too strong. If it becomes too strong, often it becomes a bit too caricature. So we need to keep it nice and soft. We don't want it to be too illustrative. Right, I'm hoping these eyes are dry enough that I can just bring in a little bit more of this dark. I'm going to reduce the size of the highlight now because I'm a little bit more in control. The smaller that highlight, the more realistic this dog will look. So I'm going nice and small. Both those eyes. And then what I'm going to do is just lift out a little bit back, just to give it a softer feel. Okay, I'm just going to blast this nose. I need to know it's dry. Before we start this layering process. So I have got, first of all, some burnt sienna. So this is going to give it a nice warmth. And take this all the way over. There is a little bit of a line I want to keep it just underneath each nostril. I'm coming on to dry. There's a little bit of a highlight here as well. You want the nose to look quite velvety, and to do that it's just building up the layers. So that's that layer on. Load my brush up with water because I don't want this dark to be too dark and thick. I've got to build it in layers. So I'm coming over with that dark now, the same dark that I used, but I'm building layers. So I can come over the nostrils as well. At this point I'm trying to preserve that little highlight that I've just left, but I won't preserve it all the time. There's going to be a lot of drying as this builds up. So I'm going to dry that one off. It's going to take about 3 or 4 layers. And then I'm going to come on again. So this is just with that dark colour now. So whatever dark colour you've used, you've got to have faith that when you're coming on, you will see through. You will see this layer. because when you paint it on you can't see and you think, but it honestly, it does work. I'm going to leave that little bit of light again here where I've left the lighter colour. Just come over the back edge of the nose. And blast again. Now I've got a little bit that's just bothering me that I've come over, so I'm just going to just rub this edge here. We all do this, little bits that bother. You think, oh, I've gone too far there, and I can just lift it quite easily. So I'm just, with a damp brush, agitating the surface, just so I lift that, so it softens that little bit in. And in fact, there's another little bit this side. Too busy with technology, not thinking about where are my glasses, but I'm managing. Okay, so this time, because it's looking quite velvety now, I'm just going to come over this side, so it's just that front plane of the nose, because the other bit of the nose is actually lighter. So this again, this layering process is bringing it all together. So just on that front plane of the nose, I'm leaving this top bit. So you want to go nice and dark. And I'm going to give it a blast again. And this basically absolutely perfects what the nose looks like, because you can hardly see the nostrils in the photograph. There is a glimmer of light. I'm going to take some of that light away there now. A tiny, tiny glimmer. And then the top of the nose is a lot lighter. I tend to prefer, I'm just dampening over that, so it just muckies that highlight up a little bit, because I don't want that to be too strong. And in fact, I'm going to do that as well with these whites of the eyes. So I'm just muckying that white of the eye up there, because I don't like them to look too strong. I think the highlights stand out, but I don't want the rest of it to stand out too much. What's quite nice as well, if you take a little dab of burnt sienna, just stick a little bit of that into the top edge of the eye where there might be a bit of shadow. It just knocks the blue back a little bit, because that as well, when it's very, very vibrant, can look too much and false. So that's a couple of little tips there. So I'm really happy with how the dog's looking, and now it's all about getting a nice background that brings the dog forward. So we're going to go wet in wet. I'm going to move the doggy out the way, have a sip of coffee. It's still playing next to me, so you're still with me. I'm not talking to myself yet. I'm going to wet the background again. I'm going to wet the background, and I'm going to bring in some darker colours. They're going to set the doggy forward. I'm also going to do an element of negative painting to bring the fur of the dog out a little bit more. Now, turquoise is phthalo blue pigment, and it often does lift a little bit. I'm on a cotton paper, I'm on Saunders Waterford, it's my usual paper. When it's dry, you can usually get away with layering quite well. So I'm going to use Perylene Violet. I'm going to use a little bit of the other colours that I've used. I might even take a little bit of the dark in. So I'm just adding some water to each of these. Probably should have added the water before I started. Let me just get the Perylene Violet activated because that's going to be my main colour. It's a beautiful colour. That's a bit dark. That doesn't look very dark because it's all in one blob still. There we go, that's better. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of the more of the turquoise. Take a little bit of that in. I've left about, and this is the cobalt blue, 1 centimetre around the dog where I can work in. It'll all become apparent when I get to that stage. You need to move really quickly now because it will dry very quickly. You don't want to eliminate all of the colours you've put in. So this is a Perylene Violet, lovely colour, really lovely. I'm just going to stroke some of that through so I get this nice multicoloured mottled effect in the background. Then I can concentrate on the creation of the fur. I'm going to dab a little bit of the dark in as well, mainly because I've used it in the picture and I like this granulation of the hematite genuine in there. I think it adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of something different. It took me years to find Daniel Smith's colours, mainly because I'm a creature of habit and I like my Winsor & Newton colours, but I must agree that the Daniel Smith are lovely. Okay, so I'm going to use a 6 and a rigger, and I'm going to move around now, and hopefully I can get in a position you can still see. So I'm going to take some of the Perylene Violet and just start to work it in at this angle. Now I find it easier to paint downwards, which is why I'm moving round. I'm painting at different angles, and I'm just going to use the Perylene Violet just so I can get this moving really quickly. Concentrating on one edge. It's helpful to have the reference photo, though you can't see it on screen. It is helpful for me to see it because I'm trying to work. So this is my rigger now, and I really just want to break in so I get that nice sort of fluffy effect. I don't want it to be too spiky. So this is paint in the background to bring out the foreground. I'm just dropping in a little bit of that dark just in places whilst it's wet. I'm going to twizzle back round this way. You can see that pulling out already, it's lovely. And then this time I should be able to come straight down and create from this side. This combination of the dark is what makes that stripy dog, stripy salad, psychedelic dog, suddenly look white. So you've got to use quite a good dark combination for this to work. Make sure when you're popping in that you're flowing through, that you're not just creating a halo around the dog. You need this to flow. So again, dropping in little bits of the dark. Just rinse that off. I'm going to drop in a little bit of cobalt blue in places as well. Trying to make sure he doesn't look like he's got horns. Just to create that little bit of variety. It's all about the variety of the stroke and the variety of the colour in this. I'm going to break this edge up a little bit. It's working really nicely. I just need to change my water very quickly because I've got to do something and it's not going to work. I need clean water. So I don't want this to end up looking all too hard. So what I'm doing is just softening in places. So I'm just touching a few areas. Because if you're not careful, it ends up looking like it's a little bit like a cutout. You don't have to do this everywhere, but that little bit of extra shadow works. I'm just going to let that flow a minute and then I'll show you how to correct that, because it's a little bit wet, which is why it's flowing so much. I'll come down to this area now. And I've run out of my dark now as well. Let's see if I can find that. Squirt a bit more of that one out. This is a process where you have to work very quickly to get this edge in, but it's just so wonderful that it does work so very well. So it's worth persisting to get this to work nicely for you. So I'm just bringing in a few little bit more bits of the dark. The more dark you get in around the edge, the more this beautiful doggy will stand out. Take a little bit of that dark in. Trying to get some of these little flowy bits. You've got to think about making sure that it looks a little bit uneven in places. Not too chunky. It can be hard to master this bit. Okay. check my brush is clean. Yep, a little bit of water. I'm just going to soften in again in places, just so that I've got this one side working really nicely. Okay, so let's just go back to that bit that's flowed too much. This happens. It's just knowing what to do when it happens. The best thing is to leave it a few minutes and then just work and dab off a little bit. I don't want to remove all the mark because that's part of the process and it's part of that softening in. I just want to lift it a little bit. It tends to happen when the paint's still a bit too wet. But this is, to me, this is all expressive marks I want in here. I just don't want it to be too dark. So I'm just dabbing just over the light, just so that I can keep that. And then the other way you can do it, we're nearly at the end now, is to just take a little bit of that Perylene Maroon or Perylene Violet, water it down a little bit, and then you can bring a few bits through, because this is quite good at softening those edges in as well, so it doesn't feel like it's cut out. So that's another way of doing it, and it just breaks it up a little bit and just adds some of the colour that you've got in that background into the painting. And then it all just gels together much better. The fancy word is synergy. Occasionally I get to say it. Gives it a lovely synergy. Brings it all together. So I'm just adding a few random dabs for movement. And I have no idea if anybody's even watched this, but hopefully it will save and some of you might watch it later anyway. Okay, so I'm pretty much there. I just need to dry this off. Okay, I'm not going to dry it off fully because it does tend to dull the colour with the hairdryer, and I think it does look lovely. So I hope you've enjoyed it. There's a few techniques there that you can pick up and give it a go. I'm just trying to see if I can see if anybody's commented. I'm not sure. Oh, 4 people are watching, so I've got 4 of you. That's brilliant. Well, thank you for sticking around while I've struggled with technology. I have no idea if I can actually answer any questions, or if there are any questions. If there are, I will answer them in the comments, because I'm still trying to work out technology. At some point, I'm sure I will get it. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I shall see you next time. Remember, like, subscribe, share. I'm trying to build my channel, and every like, subscribe and share helps, apparently. Thank you.